Western Spring Television. Ours it is.
Good evening and welcome to Spring Global on Western Spring Television. Now the headlines. Russian President Putin to meet Chinese counterpart later this year. South Africa's National Assembly begins debate on President Ramaphosa's scandal report. Israel's parliament elects ally of former Prime Minister Netanyahu as new speaker. My name is Tunde Idowu. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese leader Xi Jinping will hold talks to discuss the past year later this month. The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told newsmen that the meeting's date and agenda are already known, but an official announcement will come later. Russia has moved closer to China since sending its armed forces into Ukraine in February, which has caused its former Western allies to impose sanctions on it. French President Emmanuel Macron is hosting over 70 countries and institutions to discuss what can be offered between now and March to maintain water, energy, health, and transport in Ukraine. President Macron, in his opening speech, said since Ukraine has got back on top of the ground, Russia, whose military's weaknesses have been regularly exposed, has adopted a cynical strategy that targets civilian infrastructure. At the end of the meeting, the over 70 countries and institutions pledged over 1 billion euros in immediate aid to help Ukraine get through winter as Russian forces continue to attack its energy grid. Earlier, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky told the country's allies gathered in Paris that his country needs at least 800 million euros in urgent winter energy aid. The European Parliament in Strasbourg has voted to strip Greek Socialist member of the European Parliament, Eva Kaili, of her status as vice president amid allegations of corruption linked to World Cup host Qatar. Greek MP Eva Kaili has, however, denied involvement in the alleged bribery scandal involving World Cup host Qatar at the European Parliament. 625 members of the European Parliament voted for Ms. Kaili to be stripped of her role as one of its 14 vice presidents. He has also been suspended from the Parliament's Socialist and Democrat groups and expelled from the Greek center-left PASOK party. She is one of 4 suspects charged after Belgian investigators found large sums of cash in her home and a suitcase.
You will vote on a proposal from the Conference of Presidents for the early termination of the office of our Vice President of the European Parliament, Ms. Eva Kaili, and the vote is carried.
European Union ministers have arrived at the Extraordinary Transport, Telecommunications and Energy Council in Brussels to discuss mechanism for capping gas prices on the European market. The meeting, which is chaired by the Minister for European Affairs of the Czech Republic, Mikuláš Bek, is in preparations for the European Council meeting on the 15th of December 2022. The Council is to agree on a general approach on the regulations on the transparency and targeting of political advertising. Italy's Prime Minister, Ms. Giorgia Meloni, says that the country will take action independently to deal with Europe's energy crisis in the absence of a timely and effective European Union response. The Prime Minister revealed this while lawmakers about a December 15 European Union summit in which leaders are due to discuss, among other things, energy issues. Ms. Meloni said her government is ready to intervene at a national level if EU measures are late or prove ineffective, adding that she hoped it will not be necessary. British nurses are set to go on strike for the first time ever on Thursday, December 15th, after government failed to meet the demands of the union. Nursing staff in England, Wales and Northern Ireland will walk out on December 15 and 20 after the Royal College of Nursing Union said the government had turned down an offer of negotiation. Union representatives and accident and emergency nurse Mark Bothroyd accepted that the industrial action will cause distress for patients, but said that nurses have been forced into action. Numerous other sectors are holding strikes this December, for rail workers to ambulance drivers, with British inflation reaching a 41-year high of 11.1% in October on soaring energy and food bills.
We feel we've been forced into this. You know, as a union rep, we've protested, we've demonstrated, we've written to the government, we've done petitions, we've done everything possible to tell them how bad this has been getting, and they've not listened to us. So yeah, the strike is the last resort, but we feel forced into this. And it's not need, but more and more people are coming to A&E. We have queues out the door sometimes from 9 a.m. in the morning because there's so many patients who need to be seen. We're seeing double the number of patients every day that the A&E was built to see. There's immense pressure on beds, so you know there's days when we've got no beds in the hospital and A&E is full and we're having to have ambulances queuing outside, and this all impacts on patient care and is linked to we don't have the nurses to staff the wards and to staff these other services, and so we're striking so we can get the pay, so we can retain staff and you know resolve this crisis which is harming patients.
A teenage boy from Greece Roma community who was shot in the head during a police chase over an allegedly unpaid petrol station bill has died. The 16-year-old had been hospitalized for more than a week in the northern city of Thessaloniki after he was shot in the early hours of December 5 by a police officer on a motorcycle. Secretary of the Roma community where the boy lived, Antios Tassas, confirmed his death, adding that the community is in huge pain. The hospital treating the boy, who has not been formally identified, said he was hospitalized in critical condition in the intensive care unit after undergoing emergency surgery, but despite all efforts by medical staff, the boy died this morning. An extraordinary parliamentary session discussing the findings of an independent panel which says President Cyril Ramaphosa may be guilty of serious violations and misconduct over allegations he concealed a huge cash theft at his farm that's opened in Cape Town. The Speaker of the National Assembly, Nosivi Mapisa Nkwala, in her opening speech, said it is up to members of parliament to decide whether to proceed or not with the inquiry of the impeachment committee of the Assembly. Ramaphosa is counting on support from the ruling African National Congress Party, which has been further divided by the scandal.
Members, on the 22nd November 2018, the House adopted rules to provide for procedures to give effect to Section 89 of the Constitution. The report of the independent panel established in terms of these rules is now before the House. And after the debate, in terms of Rule 12913, the House must resolve to proceed or not to proceed with an inquiry by an impeachment committee of the Assembly.
Ethiopia's government says it will investigate the reported deaths of 27 of its citizens found dumped near Zambia's capital, Lusaka. Zambia police found the bodies of the 27 men on Sunday in Changwe Ngewere, a farming area on the outskirts of the capital, having died from suspected hunger and exhaustion. Ethiopia local news agencies said the country will send experts to the area to confirm the identities of the citizens who reportedly died while attempting to cross into South Africa illegally. Zambian police said preliminary investigation showed the victims were all aged between 20 and 38, and their bodies had been dumped along a road by unknown people. The police further revealed that officers found a 28th man gasping for breath, and he was taken to hospital. India has accused China of trying to unilaterally change the status quo on the disputed Himalayan border after clashes last week in the Taiwan sector of India's northeastern state of Arunachal Pradesh. India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh told Parliament that on December 9, 2022, the China's People's Liberation Army encroached on the line of actual control in the Yangtze area of Tawang sector. He said the Indian Army bravely prevented the PLA from encroaching on its territory and forced them to withdraw to their post, adding that soldiers from both sides were injured in the skirmish. The line of actual control is the de facto border separating Chinese and Indian-held territories from Ladakh in the west of India's eastern state of Arunachal Pradesh, which China claims in its entreaty. Last week's fight was the first between the two countries since deadly clashes in June 2020, when Indian and Chinese troops were involved in hand-to-hand combat in the Galwan Valley of Ladakh. You're watching Spring Global on Western Spring Television. We'll be right back after this.
How would you like a TV station that breaks the barriers of your TV screen? A TV station that brings infotainment to your forefront, breaking the conceptual fourth wall. Giving you television that is personal to you and your everyday life. Indigenous broadcasting for every man, cutting across the shackles of age, class, and language. With the best of equipment in digitized broadcasting. At Western Spring Television, your television experience has never been this magical.
We'll bring you the best in news and programs, breaking news to you as it drops from where it drops.
Talk shows that keep you glued to your seats, sports programs not void of in-depth analysis, entertainment programs cutting across all ages, political analysis with all its accompanying controversies, social responsibility because we care. Western Nigeria gave us our first feel of television. Western Spring Television is taking us to the next level.
You're watching Spring Global on Western Spring Television. Into all the stories, Israel's parliament has elected a new speaker, Yariv Levin, a close ally of Prime Minister-designate Benjamin Netanyahu. Levin, a senior member of Netanyahu's right-wing Likud party, was chosen as speaker to replace Miki Levy from outgoing Prime Minister Yair Lapid's Yesh Atid party. Levin is expected to quickly oversee approval of legislation that will help Netanyahu form a government. Before government can be formed, Parliament must first pass a measure allowing one of Netanyahu's most powerful allies and ultra-Orthodox Jewish leader Ari Deri to serve in cabinet despite past convictions for tax evasion. Belarus has named a new foreign minister and air force head as the country conducts a series of military activities that have raised fears it could take a more active stance in the war against Ukraine. According to the state-run news agency, Minsk named Sergei Alienik as its new foreign minister to fill the position left vacant after the death of Valdemar Maki last month. Andrei Lukyanovich, previously deputy head of the Air Force, was promoted to head of Belarus Air Force and Air Defense Unit. Belarus still remains one of the staunch supporters of Russian war in Ukraine and served as a launching pad for Russian forces. China says it was shocked by the deadly attack on a Kabul hotel popular with Chinese business people and described the terror attacks as abominable. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Weibin stated this in a news briefing, adding that China firmly opposes all forms of terrorism. He said the Chinese government was shocked by the attack on the hotel, adding that 5 Chinese nationals were wounded in the attack. Weibin further disclosed that the Chinese government expresses its grief for the Afghan military police who were killed and expressed sympathies for those injured. At least 3 people were killed when gunmen attacked the hotel in the Afghan capital on Monday, with witnesses reporting multiple blasts and several bursts of gunfire. The Islamic State group has claimed responsibility. A key border crossing between Pakistan and Afghanistan has reopened 2 days after a cross-border exchange of fire killed at least 9 Pakistani civilians and an Afghan soldier. An official at Shaman, the crossing on the Pakistani side, Abdul Hamid Zeri, told newsmen today that the situation there is back to normal. Zeri said the border is open for trade and civilian use as usual, adding that things are running smoothly and the situation is calm. The Shaman border crossing is situated nearly 74 miles northwest of Quetta, the capital of Pakistan's southwestern Balochistan province. On Sunday, the Pakistani military said unprovoked and indiscriminate firing from the Afghan side at the crossing killed several civilians and wounded more than a dozen others. Dozens of leaders from across Africa are gathering in Washington for a major summit hosted by President Joe Biden. More than 40 heads of government or state, as well as African Union officials and business people, are due to attend the 3-day gathering. U.S. officials say the summit will promote democracy and trade. The Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, told a meeting of African entrepreneurs that the emphasis will be on partnership. The U.S. is engaged in struggle for influence on the continent with China, Russia, and others ahead of the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit. The White House announced a pledge of $55 billion in economic, health, and security support for Africa over the next 3 years.
Working closely with Congress, the U.S. will commit $55 billion to Africa over the course of the next 3 years across a wide range of sectors to tackle the core challenges of our time.
Anti-government protesters have blocked roads and stormed the international airport in Peru's second city, Arequipa, as deadly unrest intensified in the country. Supporters of leftist former President Pedro Castillo took to the streets in anger at his impeachment and arrests. Dina Boluarte, his successor and former deputy, proposed bringing general elections forward by 2 years to April 2024 in response to the protest. But Mr. Castillo called Ms. Boluarte's plan a dirty game. In a handwritten letter that he tweeted, he called Ms. Boluarte an usurper and said he had been kidnapped and humiliated. At least 7 people have now died in clashes with the security forces since protests erupted over the impeachment of Mr. Castillo last Wednesday. He was accused of corruption and detained for attempting to dissolve the opposition-controlled Congress just hours before it was due to vote on his impeachment. 6 people, including 2 police officers, have been shot dead after a suspected ambush at a remote Australian property. Police said they had been searching for a missing person in Wimbilla, 270 kilometers west of Brisbane, Queensland, when they were fired upon. After a lengthy siege, 3 suspects were fatally shot by police. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called it a heartbreaking day for Australia. And in the world of business, founder of the collapsed cryptocurrency exchange FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, has been arrested in the Bahamas. The country's attorney general said he is scheduled to appear today in a magistrate court in the Caribbean country's capital, Nassau. Police said Mr. Bankman-Fried was arrested for financial offenses against laws in the U.S. and the Bahamas. Last month, FTX filed for bankruptcy in the U.S., leaving many users unable to withdraw their funds. According to a court filing last month, FTX owed its 50 largest creditors almost $3.1 billion. The FTX exchange allowed customers to trade normal money for cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. Mr. Bankman-Fried was once viewed as a young version of legendary U.S. investor Warren Buffett, and as recently as late October had a net worth estimated at more than $15 billion. In the exciting world of sport, the semi-finals of the World Cup gets underway today, with Argentina taking on Croatia later today, where Lionel Messi will hope to inspire his side into the final. Argentina defeated the Netherlands in a fiery quarter-final. Croatia will be no pushovers, though, having beaten favorite Brazil on penalties in their own last 8 clash, with Luka Modric still pulling the strings. Before we end Spring Global on Western Spring Television, here is a recap of our top stories. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese leader Xi Jinping will hold talks to discuss the past year later this year. An extraordinary parliamentary session discussing the findings of an independent panel which says President Cyril Ramaphosa may be guilty of serious violations and misconduct over allegations he concealed a huge cash theft as his farm has opened in Cape Town. Israel's parliament has elected a new speaker, Yariv Levin, a close ally of Prime Minister-designate Benjamin Netanyahu, who is expected to quickly oversee approval of legislation that will help Netanyahu form a government. You can follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. Like I say, good evening to you. I am Sunday Idowu.
How would you like a TV station that breaks the barriers of your TV screen? A TV